Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C., the podcast where entrepreneurs, founders, and ambitious professionals come to learn from those who have walked the path, navigating challenges and achieving success. Whether it's thriving in business, pivoting, scaling for growth, fundraising, or finding work-life balance, dealing with loneliness, adversity, or overcoming personal struggles. Our guests share the insights and strategies that have empowered them to level up. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Lindsay Tsang. Lindsay is a strategic planning and executive coaching expert with a rich background in organizational psychology. Lindsay has dedicated his career to guiding CEOs and business owners towards creating more effective and happier workplaces through innovative leadership strategies. Today, he's here to share his unique insights on the essentials of effective leadership, the lessons learned from leadership failures, and how leaders can continuously evolve to meet changing demands. Get ready to explore the depths of leadership with an expert who merges psychological insights with practical business acumen. Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. Got my coffee going and I'm ready to go.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so before we get started, can you introduce yourself and share what drove you to specialize in leadership within the field of strategic planning and executive coaching?
Yeah, so I just actually recently finished my doctorate. So I have a PhD in organizational psychology. And so I would say that, as a even at a young age, I've kind of been put into positions of leadership. I don't know why. It's just always kind of happened to me. So it gave me that kind of hunger for learning more about it and doing it properly. But as well, I had the good chance of being under some really good leaders and seeing the effects of that.
Mm.
Now, I think most people would agree too that they've been under really poor leadership before and felt the effects of that as well. So I think that would be also a part of my journey of wanting to fix that. I'm also a therapist, so I have been seeing clients. A lot of them do come in because of work-related stresses. And often, if you peel under the layers, it's really because of poor management or leadership, right? So that's kind of part of that drive to, grow beyond my therapy practice into that leadership realm.
Awesome. So, in your view, what are the foundational qualities of effective leadership, and how can emerging leaders cultivate these qualities
Hmm.
from the outset of their careers?
Okay, wow. Well, I think, it's really hard to even define leadership, right? There's so many different types of definitions for it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go textbook here and go with, what I learned in class, right? Leadership is the interactions between a leader and its followers towards a common vision. And I would say that's a pretty good one because it takes followers to have leaders too, right? And towards a common vision. I would add also that it's toward a positive vision because negative visions rarely last for a very long time.
Yeah.
Because you can, argue that, say, Hitler was a good leader in terms of bringing up, a vision that people were willing to put their lives down to follow, but it ended up in the defeat of the nation and the shame, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a positive vision that you're bringing forth with other people, that would last for generations. So I would say, yeah, good leadership is a good vision, and the interaction between leaders and followers that brings them towards that. Um, so I guess that overall it does have, it's not only that, but it does have to do with the ability to influence somebody to move towards action.
Yeah. So let's talk about the essence of this show, which is, I bring on guests so that our listeners can learn from. And the majority of our listeners are entrepreneurs who are on their entrepreneurial journey and looking to learn from the people who have been there and done it. Some are aspiring entrepreneurs or founders, and a lot of them are either on in early stages or wanting to pivot. So they're really new to leadership, and a lot of them are sort of learning as they go and trying to figure it out, which can sometimes be difficult. So I thought we could focus this episode to those listeners to help them, be better leaders and lead their teams with success. How do psychological principles inform your coaching practices, and what common psychological barriers do leaders need to overcome to enhance their effectiveness?
Hmm. I mean, I think you're catering this question for me because of my background, right, in psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good question. I think, I mean, there's probably so much to that answer, right? But
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with what I know because I write about it. So my original research was on servant leadership. So servant leadership is a style that prioritizes the individual needs of their followers above even that of the organization. Uh,
Mm,
and what that does is it creates this supportive kind of environment or culture that allows these followers to have better positive psychological states, and therefore they perform better and they are less likely to want to quit, so forth and so on. So that's what my research was on. So I guess I can touch a little bit on the psychological states that were in that paper.
yeah.
It's a concept called psychological capital. So this is something I didn't make up. You can look it up.
Mm.
But there's yeah, but basically it is part of the positive psychology realm, where we're not looking at what's not working, but we're looking at what makes people thrive and succeed, right? So the four major states that are studied are hope, um, efficacy is another fancy word for confidence, resilience, and optimism. And so what you find is that when a leader has these mentalities, they are more likely to be a servant leader, but they're also more likely to produce followers who have the same qualities as well.
Mm,
Um, so and I don't know exactly why. I don't know people like there's different theories for that, right?
yeah.
Perhaps it's because people are good at modeling after their leaders, right? Which might be a huge part of it,
Right.
or because the leaders have gone so far and above to care for or taking care of their followers that they also now have
Mm,
reciprocal positive states that goes along with it. um yeah, so these four states, what's really neat about it is that they're not traits, they are developable. You can work on them, you can increase them, and if you want we can dive into a little bit more of that, but we don't, depending on what you want to go go with
Well,
it.
I
Yeah.
like the first question that came to mind was like, I get what you're saying, but like, let's take it to the real world.
Hmm.
Stressful. Like
Yeah.
leaders who are running companies or have teams under them, like you already have all this stress of trying to, meet the bottom line, hit revenue,
Yeah.
keep your business running, financials, blah 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 blah, all that stuff. And now you gotta like watch what you say, how you act, what you do and don't do so that you can keep your team happy. And I get the reason why you have to do it. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but I just want to be human about it. Like that's really stressful. And like why how can leaders navigate through that? Because like there's
Mm-hmm.
days when you're just in a bad mood and everybody irritates you because you have a million things on your mind. And I know I've
Yeah.
experienced this where I've made comments to people and I'm like, I hate that I have to be on all the time, meaning I have to be careful with how I act. I have to be careful what I say. Like I find that when I'm in a bad mood, my whole team is off that day.
Yes.
They're not
Yeah.
being productive, but like I can't be on all the time.
One of the things that psychologically, not just as a leader, as a good functioning adult human being needs to have, is good emotional boundaries, right? And what that means is that it's not my job to fix your emotional state, right? Um,
I
so yeah, so I need to be able to here's like a visual exercise that I use sometimes with some of my therapy clients, right? I would say, like, I want you to imagine someone who's in a very terrible state, and then just imagine what kind of emotions you're getting right now as you're looking at them. So these little kind of like people, I use this as an analogy, right? Like these little like emotions are coming up in front of you and blocking your view of that person because I'm getting invested in their emotion.
Mhm.
So I would say now I want you to practice, getting those little people to go behind you so that you have a clearer view of them. And when you do, does that change the state? And so they're like, yeah, it feels a bit clearer, it feels a little bit more calm, right? So I would argue then that's the difference between a compassionate presence with somebody versus an empathetic attachment to that person's feelings. And that's a really important skill to have. Okay, for me as a therapist, 100%, because I'm just meeting with people all day long with emotional baggage. And so if I were to get over involved with each one of those, first of all, I won't help them, right? They would feel like they're burdening me, right?
Yeah.
And second of all, I would be burnt out and done very, very fast, right? So leadership is kind of similar, right? And when other people come and they're stressed out, I don't let that stress. I don't take on that stress for them. What I do is I give them compassionate space to say, okay, tell me what it is, right? And I might not even be there to solve your problems unless you're asking me to, right? Um, and as we were talking about the four psychological states earlier, they do come into play in a very practical way in situations like that. I can think of at least two ways. Actually, maybe three of them would fit into that.
Mhm.
Um, because let's say for resilience, it's just my ability to bounce back during challenges, right?
Right.
And the main skill here is to recognize what is outside of my control or our control and what is within our realm of control, and then putting energy towards that instead,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So as a leader, then, there's kind of two things I'm doing here when someone's coming to me, one of my followers coming to me with a stressful situation. A is I'm giving them the space to you know be heard and to complain or whatever, and I'm just staying. I'm allowing myself to be compassionately present for that, right? And but then where we eventually want to bring them to is to say, hey, you know what? Like, I hear what you're talking about. I can see why that's stressful. Um, uh, and right now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to list out what we can control about this and what we can't. And we're going to radically accept that these are the things we can't control. And so we can move on to putting energy towards where we can start controlling. And that's a skill set. So it's just two skill sets going on there at once. So no, you're right. It is hard, isn't it?
You have different kinds of people in the world. Some people are more outspoken
Yep.
and they're feeling uncomfortable about something. They might go to their boss or their, leader and talk about it and express. Some people are a little bit
Yeah.
shyer or there are cultures where the boss is the person you look up to and you never say anything and the only way to deal with it is to quit. What advice would you give to leadership on how to create an environment that is truly an open door policy where everyone might feel comfortable with coming to you and expressing whether you've made them feel a certain way or they're frustrated with something? I know that's a hard question to
Yeah.
answer, but everyone has this policy of open door policy, but the door isn't always open. So for
Yeah.
young leaders who are just starting out, how can they start their companies out on the right track so that they have long lasting teams?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just gonna go tactics here. So they're not so much
Yeah.
theories, right? I think that there's a couple of things that just came to my mind quickly. I think one thing is actually having a closed door versus open door hours, right? So So, I mean, what's helpful for that is you know when you're not supposed to bother me because I'm working on things, right? Versus when, yeah, now the door is open and I 100% would like to hear your stuff because I've created space for that, right? So that could be a helpful tactic, because then it's like permission to or not, right? They know that you're still doing the things you need to do when you were supposed to.
Yeah.
Um, I think the other thing is okay, one of the I really love this article, and I it's from the Gallup company. And they are like the experts on employee engagement, right? And they would talk about how the one tactic that managers and leaders do that is more powerful than the rest in terms of like predictability for engagement is just simply a 15-minute meaningful conversation per week with each direct follower report,
Mhm.
right? And so I think if you're making space for those little conversations on the weekly, that's how that openness becomes apparent, right?
Yeah.
So it's the small things often that would make that a more open space, I think.
Yeah.
um uh Obviously, I think when you do listen, right, what you don't want to do, and this is where my marriage therapist part comes in, right? What you don't want to do is you're already thinking about how to solve the problems right away,
Mm.
because that's where communication is cut off, and then people don't really feel like they're actually heard or understood, right? So if you give a lot of safety when people come to you with issues, you let them, you don't go, no, don't think that way, it's not like that, right? That shuts them off. But if you give them the space to say what they need to and understand them, ask questions, be curious, right, then there's going to, and you continue to do that, then they're going to feel very safe with you to be able to bring up issues, right?
Okay, so I have another question for you
Yeah.
based on that. So, at what point I'm asking a lot of these questions because you're talking and I'm like, I've been through that. So, like, at what point do you open your door, try to have these conversations with your team, but don't get to a point where people feel so comfortable that they start
Oh
taking
yeah,
advantage of you?
100%. That's a really good point, and that's why it's a tricky balance, because you most good management theory would talk about four quadrants of leadership styles.
Yeah,
um and that's when you have high accountability and high healthy relationship with
yeah,
the team. And usually people swing to one end or the other too far, right? The very cozy permissive style versus the really authoritarian I say you do style. And sometimes people get really confusing and they flip-flop between the two. Right?
yeah. I've been
um
there. I've done
yeah,
it.
right. And I totally know how I've done it before many times, right? So there's no, so I guess I want to put a lot of grace out there, for how difficult this actually is, right?
I don't think
Um,
people realize how difficult it is.
mhm. And so I think you have to make a lot of clarity. You have to show people why, like, this is the same thing in parenting, right? So
Mm.
like you have the permissive parents, you have the authoritarian parents. So you kind of have to be able to explain to them, like, listen, this is, in the most ideal world, I will be both those things with you. That's where studies show the most, you know, adaptive for whoever is the receiving end of it becomes, is when you have both a high amount of healthy relationship with the person and a high amount of accountability for them.
Hmm.
And so, based on that, where are we now? And what do we need to start doing to go the opposite end for a little while to turn back around to this ideal state where we're both at the same time?
Hmm.
Yeah, so like my thing is I'm a I like to like people and I like people to like me. So I'm more I'm more likely to be the permissive style, right? So
Yeah.
so I have to be clear on what I need to go to the other side, but I also probably need to create structures for that. Hmm.
What do your customers expect from you as a coach?
Hmm. Well, I think the number one thing is probably results, right? But which is what people pay for coaching for.
Mm. But
But
what kind of results?
Uh, well, it depends on, I think a lot of people are not clear on what that is. So, like they would hire me on, and I'll say, okay, so what's the end goal here for these 6 months? And they'll be like, I want to be a better leader. I'm like, that's a very broad statement. What does
Yeah,
that mean, right?
yeah.
So sometimes they don't know, and we would have to discover that, right, through doing surveys, 360 surveys, or doing diagnostics and seeing if there's any gaps there, right? So that's the kind of stuff that I'm trying to develop more and more now, is having these, like I'm creating one 25-point like diagnostic to see where all the gaps are in terms of those leadership skills, right?
Mhm.
And that way we can just we know what to work on, we have a checklist to work on. So that's something that uh and so my kind of new program I'm coming up with, it's I put 5 E's to it. I'm like, okay, you need to learn. So the first 2 E's we talked about already, right? I need to learn how to execute, and I need to learn how to engage. So that's the healthy relationship and the accountability piece, right? I need to learn how to third is envision. So how to get buy-in to vision, right?
Mhm.
And then I have to explore. I need to figure out how to keep growing and innovating myself and my team, and then finally how to empower. So I need to set up systems so that people know how to follow it, and that I could actually eventually take a step back role from the day to day
Mhm.
and be able to oversee what's going on, or leave it to the team, right? So those are like the for me. I know there's more stuff out there for leadership, but this is my
Yeah.
framework right now that I'm working around to give a snapshot for the leaders I'm helping, where they might need to uh, fill the gap.
Yeah. And once you identify, what it is after you do these exercises, and you identify the area where they need the most help in, what's your process like when you're working with that leader?
Well, I mean, it is kind of, coaching is very flexible because it's
Yeah.
all about what's in your context, right? So we would say, hey, if that's the case, let's paint a really clear vision of the end goal, and then let's work backwards on the sub steps you need to take to get there. And so the coaching is just helping you clarify that entire path, and then making you decide to go and do it. Right. So that's, yeah.
Do you ever find yourself being a psychologist to your clients?
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, by my nature,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's happening all the time. But yeah.
So from working with people, is there a common thing that you find that you work most on with leaders, and what would that be?
A lot of it is paralysis, because when should I do this thing, or when should I do that thing, or can I do this thing, right? So and it's kind of funny, right? Because when you come as a coach, um part of it is that I have some expertise, but part of it too is that I'm just good at asking good questions. So as I'm asking these questions and they're talking it out loud, they're figuring it out on their own. Like, yeah, I guess I should just do that thing.
I mean, like, do you find that people get so overwhelmed that it basically causes like paralysis and they just don't know where to start, what tasks to do first, just because they're so overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's so many tasks to leadership, right? And okay, so here's the thing, right? Like most of the guys I'm working with, because they're smaller companies, right?
Yeah.
Is that they were in it from the first day. So they're the sales team, the operational team, and the finance and administrative team all at once, right? So when I think this is where it came to, actually, I was starting to realize that when they say I want to become a better leader, right? They're actually saying that I want to learn what it means to be the CEO of my company and not the salesperson of my company,
Right.
right? Or not the person who's on the roof hammering down you know the tiles, right? So yeah, so there's just they're so good at what they do, and so they don't know when or when to bring in somebody to take over that role so they can take on a different leadership role, right? Or if they should be the leader, or should hire someone else to become that, So that's I think that's the what I'm hearing from them, right? When they say I want to be a better leader.
And do you think part of that is from that mentality of this is my baby, or is it because they think that if they want something to get done right, they have to do it themselves?
Ooh, it might be a bit of both, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think also they're probably really good at what they do. So,
Yeah.
right.
Like
They're
hard
yeah,
to understand as your company grows that you have to let go of certain roles.
yeah.
So, how do you work with your entrepreneurs to educate them on all of these things ahead of time so that they know what they're going encounter eventually?
Just because you know doesn't mean you're acting on it,
Yeah,
right? Like when you talk about like, hey, you haven't taken a vacation in a while because you can't,
right.
right? And they know the pain points of it, right? I had a really high one of my clients, he was talking to me about how he's created a monster, he's
Okay.
like, and now I need to feed it. He's like, right? He's like, yeah, there's no stopping. Like we had to keep finding bigger projects to keep feeding all the employees I hired,
Right.
or whatever. So I think that on one hand, he's continuing to feed the monster. On the other hand, he knows that it's a monster, right? So it's kind of like okay, like I think you recognize that it is a monster, so maybe we need to figure out how to make it into something that it's not. Well, it's something that can run without you, right? I mean, I when I got into entrepreneurialism myself, which was almost by accident, right? But it's like I had a I was lucky enough to have a pretty clear vision of what I wanted from it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was a life of freedom, right? So um, I knew I would have to work hard to get to that point, uh, but it was designed for that, right? So even in say like my counseling practice, I've never done more than 3 days of counseling a week
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning of it. And even when I was making very very little money. So after 3 days was filled up and I wasn't making the money I needed, I knew I had to hire hands. I needed to hire associates, right? So because I had the end in mind, I was able to design a company that was meant to serve me and not the other way around.
You're saying, you built a company to serve you and not the other way around. I think that's really powerful. I think if more people did that, then they wouldn't be as stressed out and overwhelmed as they are in their lives, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's like a double-edged sword here, right? I think, I'm not saying there's right or wrong to any of this. If you take two circles and you kind of get them to get closer and closer until they overlap, right? That's actually one of the diagnostics for identification with your company, right? So you can put your
Right.
name in one of the circles and your company in the other. And so typically what you would want for your employees is that they have a high overlap there, right? Because that means that they are invested, they are engaged, they really care for the mission and the vision of the company, and you want that, and you want that for yourself, of course, right?
Yeah.
But I think the double-edged sword there is that when it's so overlapped, um, then the company becomes your identity, right? And there's good to it. I think. I mean, some people can take that to high heights and succeed, right? I think there's the side where like now I'm consumed, right? Everything and anything I do or think about is about the company, and that's probably not so healthy either. So that's
Well, I
just
mean,
my
it's also not healthy if you want to eventually exit. No investor is going to
yeah,
invest in a company that's fully dependent on founder, right? They want to be able
right,
to acquire, move on, and make sure that the company is still functioning without the founder if they
yeah,
haven't gotten
yeah,
the company, right? So I think it's a good exercise to start learning how to do early on so that if you're
hmm
to that stage, the company's not dependent on you.
Right. I have an argument. I think that the happiest leaders are the ones where the followers really take on the vision and it grows beyond what you can imagine it to be.
Yeah.
Right. It takes on a life of its own. Right.
Yeah.
But part of that is letting go that this is not my vision, but our vision and their vision. Right. Um, yeah. So it's creating something that's bigger than myself. Right. And that's kind of the point of starting a company, I guess, right?
No, for sure. You started so you can have more freedom and not
Yeah.
have a boss and not have like your employees all of a sudden become your boss or you become your own boss, right? Where you can't
Mm.
take vacation. So as we're coming out up on time, I just want to ask you one last question about the future. Looking ahead, how do you foresee the practice of leadership evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a good question. I honestly, I think the principles stay pretty much the same.
Mhm.
I mean, they are like, 1,000 years of watching leadership, and it doesn't change too much. You're really just having leaders who have a beautiful vision for the future and then bringing people alongside with them to make that happen. That's what good leadership is, right?
Yeah.
The only differences would be how technology and mindsets change that in the context when they come. And I can't foresee exactly what that would look like right now. I just know that, for example, we're living through, AI and remote companies, and but it's still the same principles. You still need to engage with people. You still need to move whatever that is towards the vision that you're in, that you're all excited about making happen, right?
Hmm. Well, I think that's a good segue to end this episode. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your knowledge with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I want to extend a thank you to Lindsay for joining us today and sharing such invaluable insights and actionable strategies. It's clear that effective leadership isn't just about guiding others, but also about continual self improvement and adaptation to change. I hope you found today's discussion enlightening and that it has inspired you to reflect on your own leadership journey and the impact you can make within your organizations. And that's a wrap. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of learning, growth, and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and connect with our community on social media. I'd love to hear your feedback, so leave a review and let me know what topics you'd want to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace challenges, adapt with tenacity, and keep pushing forward. Keep growing, keep pivoting, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you more insightful conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, keep chasing your dreams with tenacity.